Hi, everyone, and welcome. This is so special for me because I don't have a podcast and I just get to, do kind of one-off interviews like this when it's really special. And today is one of those days. I'm so glad that you're here for this conversation because I think it's going to resonate so deeply with a lot of you, especially those of you who are parents. And then, of course, if you've been ever called too sensitive or highly sensitive yourself, which I know you probably have if you're in my audience, you know that sensitivity can really feel like both a gift and a challenge. So, today we're going to explore that dynamic more deeply and especially what it means to nurture sensitivity in children. I am so delighted today to be with Dr. Judith Orloff, MD. She's a New York Times bestselling author, a psychiatrist, and an empath. She's the author of the upcoming children's book, The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, which is about a caring cottontail who is shamed for her sensitivities, but then learns to embrace them. Dr. Orloff's other books include The Genius of Empathy, The Empath's Survival Guide, and Thriving as an Empath. Dr. Orloff also specializes in treating highly sensitive people in her medical practice. Her work has been featured on The Today Show, CNN, Oprah Magazine, The New York Times, and USA Today. Dr. Orloff has spoken at Google LA and TEDx, and you can explore more of her work at drjudithorloff.com. Thank you so much for making the time to talk to me.
You're very welcome.
And I have to tell folks listening, I mean, I'm kind of having a fangirl moment here because Dr. Orloff is really one of the main pioneers of these topics of empath, highly sensitive person, intuition, going back to the 90s, right?
Right, right.
And if you don't mind me asking, just one thing that's really been on my mind is even when I started specializing in this, like in, I don't know, 2010, there was so few people talking about it. And I'm just wondering, how did you have the clarity and also the courage to be one of the first voices, broaching these topics?
Guidance and or inspiration.
Mm.
I wanted to write a book. I was at a point where I wanted to have children, but I wasn't meeting somebody that I could have children with.
Mm.
And so I began writing. I reignited my writing process. I wrote a lot as a child.
Oh.
And I just began writing, and that creativity helped with the urges to create, in a big way. My writing began to take that place. And it just, I started writing, and it was a reuniting of my writing because I wrote as a child, but my mother published a poetry book that I wrote with my consent. But I was so embarrassed and ashamed once it came out, and all her patients were reading it. She was a doctor. And I'm, oh my God, my first this and my first that. And I shouldn't have let her do it. And I got very embarrassed. So I stopped writing. And so this, my first book, Second Sight, which came out in the late 90s, was about my journey as a psychiatrist, as an empath, as a highly sensitive child, just like Aurora in this, The Highly Sensitive Rabbit. And people called me overly sensitive and shamed me. And I thought there was something wrong with me. And believe me, there was no one around back then who could help, or at least that's how I felt.
Yeah.
Maybe there was some beautiful grandmother out there
Mm.
of some very lucky child who was educating their child all about sensitivity. Mine didn't. I was pretty much alone. So but that's fine. I mean, that was part of my path, and that's makes me into who I am today and why I'm writing. I have written a book called The Highly Sensitive Rabbit about a rabbit who was called overly sensitive,
Mm.
just like I was, and just like so many of us
Mhm.
have been called, all the sensitive people in the world,
Mhm.
and how she learned to embrace her abilities and come into her power and learn to protect herself with various skills.
Mm. Oh gosh, there's like three things I want to respond to that you just said. First off, I'm hearing that writing, it almost reconnected you with a self-affirmation of your truth and your experience that you weren't going to get anywhere else.
It's true. That's how it happened for me. And writing has always been my medium. I've always written, I've
Mm,
scribbled on pieces of paper, I've written plays. When I was a child, I just wrote. That was just my thing.
mm,
And I stopped writing
mm,
because I got kind of overwhelmed by all the impact. Oh, honey, that's so
mm.
beautiful. I was like, want to hide.
Too
That's
much.
at that point.
Yeah, at that time.
I don't want to hide now.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
That's what how children sometimes react.
Yes, yes, 100%. So you almost wrote your reality into being in a way that validated yourself and then launched this whole cultural, you're speaking out to all the people who weren't spoken to. And
Exactly. And all
and
the
I
people thought they were
who thought
crazy.
they were crazy and broken and shameful. And I really relate to that very I had a wonderful grandmother. Kind of you mentioned the grandma. I was so lucky to have this sensitive grandma who saw me. And yet the overarching feeling was I'm alone. What's wrong with me? This shame. And so when I read, I got to see an early copy of The Highly Sensitive Rabbit. And when I read it, it actually made me feel tearful and it made me feel so seen in a way. And it was like my inner child was feeling seen in a way that I could imagine reading it as a kid and being like, somebody is speaking to this thing that I'm carrying every day that no one can see. Oh my gosh. And so I'm wondering, I have chills as I say this. I'm so happy this book is going to be in the world. And I'm just curious why you've written so many amazing books in your career. Why at this point did you decide to write this book?
Oh, I mean, my heart goes out because I believe highly sensitive children will save the world because
Mm,
they have the abilities to have empathy. They have the abilities to realize how important our planet is. So they will want to save it. It won't be a debate in their heads. They
mm,
won't waste all that time. They'll just know what to do to care for the planet, to care for our bodies, to care for ourselves. But they need to be in good shape. They're going to inherit the world, but they need to be in good shape. They can't be suffering from absorbing all the stress in the world or their codependent tendencies to want to help
mm,
everybody that will burn them out. And so, the book just gives very simple tools. It's for children and adults. Take
mm,
a breath, talk to people who understand,
mm,
meditate,
mm,
put a protective bubble around you when you feel overwhelmed. Now, that's for children. It's written very simply in the book so a child can practice as they're reading it. But it's something we all need to do. So they need to have some skills in place as children. So when they grow up and they're teenagers and they grow into their 20s and they grow into their mission and purpose, they
mm,
need to have some skills and knowledge that they're not going to get overwhelmed by all this. It's not going to eat them up because they're strong people,
mm,
strong, sensitive. So I
mm,
want to start with the young ones now and help to solidify their grounding in the beginning. And it will make a world of difference because if you look back, or everyone listening looks back and see, what if you had this as a child? What
mm.
if you had it? It would make growing up a lot different.
That's right. It would be game changing. I mean, yeah, I'm just really struck by you and I probably see in our practices. I know in my own life, yeah, adults are having to work our way back from that because by the time they find me and you, it's like they're pretty beaten down. They're not able to
Right.
give of their gifts because of all the baggage and the hurt that accumulates over time. And so we're having to kind of backtrack and undo it. And what I'm hearing is this book is a tool to help support parents to give kids the capacity to navigate life as a sensitive from the beginning, getting to sidestep the beaten down phase.
Well, I think inevitably we'll get beaten down because it's such a world, that if
True.
beaten down, just be compassionate with yourself.
Mm,
That's part of coming into your abilities. And
mm,
go meditate, go take a bath, go shut your door, don't talk to anybody.
mm,
Replenish yourself, however you do it. Go walk in nature. But
mm,
then next morning, what I do is I just go right back to my meditation altar, put my hands together, close my eyes,
mm,
center myself, and start again.
That's so compassionate. I really love just even how you answered that question of there's no getting it right, there's no arrival, and that no matter where we are, kids or adults, we just reset and start again. And so that's part of the teaching in the book as well. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that because I see about the story, if that's okay,
Sure.
itself, because I see in the story, it's like you show us how this sweet rabbit, Aurora, the sensitive rabbit, gets overwhelmed and then what she does from there. So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about the journey she goes on.
Yes, and there's a great storm that happens in the book, and she's out alone in the storm, and all she's doing is worrying about all the animals who are getting displaced and not taking care of herself. And she was separate from her family. So that's so true of sensitive people that we care so much about other people and about nature that sometimes we neglect our own self-care. And
Mm,
so part of her story is learning that. It's learning that you have to take care of yourself at times.
mm,
You must. And so she luckily found her way back to her family. And she was so distraught because her house was gone. And this
mm.
resonated particularly in Los Angeles because we had a terrible fire here in the
Right.
Palisades, where so many of my friends and people, colleagues, have lost their homes. So it just happened to be resonant with this theme and the trauma of losing your home or anything, and how you can learn from the trauma and build up from the ashes and start learning to protect yourself, start learning how to
Mm,
keep your heart safe and protect your energy, and find others, at least a couple of people if you can, who are soulmates, soulmate friends on Ankara.
So I'm hearing just the poignancy and the rawness that you wrote this story from. It's like really connected to this experience of this. It's not subtle, right? As a sensitive, and I feel like this is something you speak to a lot. It's pretty intense to live with this type of nervous system and this type of, I don't know, brain and body. And I know that pretty much everyone I work with is highly sensitive, and many of them are parents, and they just so desire to support their kids. And I was just talking to someone today about, her saying, I'm trying to figure out how to support myself in all this
Right.
and then support my kid at the same time. And it's so much. And I'm just curious, how might parents ground themselves when they're like, okay, my kid is hurting. I want to be there for them and I want to help them not be overwhelmed. How can they start grounding themselves first? What can they do?
Well, first of all, they need to nurture their own inner child. That's the one that's so afraid and helpless and feeling like they can't stick up for themselves in the world and they're just a passive recipient or a victim.
Mm,
No, find that little girl or boy again. That's the one that's afraid. You're adult. You're empowered, sensitive person. Know
mm,
how to handle this through techniques such as grounding, meditation, learning to put a shield around your body if you feel like you're being drained,
mm,
resting, walking in nature, um, observe, don't absorb, and really try not to absorb everybody else's energy in the world, because it's not your business, honestly, and
mm.
that nicely.
Yeah, I agree.
To just take care of your own needs,
Mm,
as well as help your children
mm,
to calm down. First of all, that's the one thing, that they tantrum. And many sensitive children will get overloaded by sensory stimuli. That's very common. And I've experienced it. I'm sure you've experienced it. It's
Absolutely.
very painful,
Mm.
very painful. They're not just being antagonistic. That's not what's going on. What's going on is too many lights, too many sounds, too many people, too many talk, too much talking. I'm angry, I'm upset, like scream, you know. And then they start screaming and crying and pounding. And
Yes.
it's because they don't know what to do with all.
Yeah.
You have to teach them, honey, you're
Mm.
a lovely, sensitive soul, and sometimes you get overwhelmed. And that's fine. But when you get overwhelmed, this is what you do. And I want you to practice this, or we could do it together. And a simple things like, let's just take a breath together.
Mm.
Both of us. I need to calm down too. That was very upsetting. We need to calm down, both of us. And so mommy and daughter or son can take the sacred breath together and begin to calm the nervous system and self-regulate.
Mm. Wow. Again, a couple things I want to touch on. So one, so powerful what you said is when we're wigged out, a lot of times it's that our inner child is
Yes.
freaked out. So
Yeah.
rather than, oh, I need all these, adult complex tools and I need to think it through, we need to slow down and go to our inner child and help her take a breath or
Right.
him
And
take a
honey,
breath.
how are you? Honey, how are you? Let me hold your hand. Let me protect you. Let me help you here. You know, the adult has to say that to the child. And that's where the book comes in. You
Uh,
could bring at that moment, I mean, you could try it, at that moment, bring
yes.
it out, show the people, show the children the visuals, and just kind of focus on the book and not the upsetness. Begin to
Mm.
just, oh, honey, let's look at this. What do you think? Isn't this pretty? Look at all the crap.
Could you show a page or two of the art? Because it's so stunning and you're right, it's very soothing. Just looking at the visuals.
It's very soothing. Like this is,
Oh, good her.
I don't
Oh,
know if you can see
her
it.
mom. Yes,
So
yes.
cute. The expressions on their faces,
Oh,
so innocent. All right, right.
oh, look at that.
Here's the coyote.
Oh my gosh.
She worries so much. The coyote house, she worries so much about if he's okay and why he's howling, you
Mm.
know, and then think of herself. So that's a part of the lesson. And
Mm.
I'm sure we all can relate to that. You hear the animal howling. My neighbor has a dog that whines and howls all the time. And I'm always talking to him, going, it's okay, RJ. It's only the Amazon person going by. So, we empaths, that's what we do.
Yes.
We do. We care so much about other people and other animals too. And this is the javelina, who's my favorite animal. And I wanted to include the javelina as an animal in the book because the javelina is different. She isn't typically beautiful. She's gorgeous in
Mm.
her own way. She's the wild boar, and she's out in the desert wandering around all the time. And sometimes people get afraid of them because they're wild. They're wild creatures, so you don't
Mm.
want to eat them
Mhm.
necessarily. But they can be so sweet and so understanding and so loving. Because I've experienced them. The book takes place in the Sonoran Desert, which is just a
Mm.
little south of Tucson in Arizona.
Mm.
And that's where they live. They live in a limited locale. And I wanted to include animals maybe that children didn't know. I like that the javelina is different and embraces her differences. She has her difference in her nobility.
That's right.
And
There's
so,
like a robustness to her as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I wanted to include animals like that.
I wanted to ask you something about just what you're speaking about animals and nature. And in the beginning of the book, Aurora is, I believe it starts with her appreciating all of these sensory details in nature. And I was just talking to somebody today about as sensitives, often a pretty profound connection with nature. And so I'm just wondering if you could speak to anything about that, your choice to choose animals rather than people, or have the setting be in nature, or just nature as a tool, as one of the grounding tools for us.
Right, right. Well, I chose the Sonora Desert because it's such a lovely desert and there's so many creatures and colors and sand dunes and shapes. And, it's a very rich aesthetic environment, and barren at the same time. So I
Mm.
like it's just not pretty, it's everything. So it's what we want as empaths, to be everything and want to embrace nature. And I wanted to put it in a natural environment
Mm.
because truths become more evident in natural environments. They get sometimes obscured in the city with all the noise and the hubbub. And so I wanted to put it in a clearer place of truth where a beautiful family, a family of rabbits, is living a life of rabbits. And they have a highly sensitive rabbit as part of their family.
Mm.
And so I wanted to choose the animals to avoid human problems. I didn't want to deal with the humans. Humans, the children's mind and adults' mind could get so complex when it comes to human beings that it's harder for them to come from their heart.
Mm.
Sensitive people often love animals, so they go right into their hearts. And so I just wanted to bypass all the human noise to get to the essence of being a highly sensitive animal and rabbit with a heart and the struggles.
You've said now twice about like when you were talking about the javelina and then just right now of being all of us, the contrast, not just and I think this goes back to so many sensitives learning to mask of, oh, here's who I've learned the world needs me to be. More simple, nice, mild emotions and embracing the quote unquote ugly, which is not ugly, the big, the robust, the not fitting into the nice box, embracing all of ourselves. And I'm curious, in your perspective, is that part of the journey of the empath, of coming back
Yes,
to
yes,
owning
yes,
that?
ultimately, yes,
Mm.
ultimately, and always the self, to embrace yourself, and
Mm.
have self empathy, and to, with Aurora the rabbit in the book, for her to say, I've had a hard time, but I'm learning these skills, and now I understand a little more, rather than why was I this way all this time?
Mm.
Well, how you could beat yourself up. And
Oh, yes.
this, and being a highly sensitive rabbit, the embodiment of that is not beating yourself up, because that's not the way we want to be. And we won't be in our power, and we won't be able to fulfill our purpose if that's what we're doing all the time. It's
That's right.
sap your energy if you beat yourself up all the time.
Wow. Well, I want to honor your time. I'm so grateful for you having this conversation with me. There were just so many gems that were dropped there. And again, the amazing ability of a children's book to convey so much at such an emotional level. So I'm just so excited for people to check this out. You can check out Dr. Orloff's books, articles, and more at drjudithorloff.com. So thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of your time today.
You're very welcome. It was delightful speaking to you.